For years, the world believed the AI race had only one winner, Nvidia. Every headline pointed to the same company. Every investor chased the same stock. Every tech conference talked about the same GPUs. If you wanted to build artificial intelligence, you needed Nvidia, or at least that's what everyone believed. But history has a strange habit. The biggest shifts rarely happen under the spotlight. They happen in silence. While the entire world was watching one company, another country was quietly building something almost nobody was paying attention to. Not a chatbot, not another AI model, not another graphics card, something much less exciting. At least, that's how it looked. Memory. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Memory? Really? How could something as ordinary as RAM become one of the most important technologies in the entire AI revolution? Well, that's exactly the question almost everyone asked. And that question may have caused the world to overlook one of the biggest technological shifts happening today. Because while billions of dollars flowed into AI companies, while governments fought over advanced GPUs, while headlines celebrated faster processors, China was investing somewhere else, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. Not because it didn't understand AI, but because it understood something most people didn't. The fastest processor in the world is useless if it spends half its time waiting for data. Think about that for a second. Imagine you've built the fastest race car ever created. The engine is perfect, the aerodynamics are flawless, the tires are brand new. Now imagine driving that race car through a traffic jam. Suddenly, all that power means almost nothing. Not because the car became slower, because something else became the bottleneck. That's exactly what happens inside modern AI systems. Everyone talks about computing power. Very few people talk about feeding that computing power. Every AI model, every generated image, every chatbot response, every scientific simulation, every recommendation, every calculation needs one thing before anything else. And that data has to move constantly, every second, without stopping. The larger AI models become, the more data they consume. The faster processors become, the faster they demand information. Eventually, even the world's most powerful AI chip reaches a point where it isn't waiting for more computing power. It's waiting for memory. Inside the semiconductor industry, this has a name. The memory bottleneck. It's one of the least understood concepts outside engineering. But once you understand it, you begin seeing the AI race very differently. Imagine you're trying to feed 10,000 construction workers. The workers aren't the problem. The food isn't the problem. The kitchen isn't even the problem. The problem is a single tiny doorway. No matter how much food exists, only a limited amount can pass through at once. Everyone else waits. Now replace the workers with GPUs. Replace the food with data. Replace the doorway with memory bandwidth. Suddenly, the entire AI industry starts making a lot more sense. This is why companies building massive AI data centers don't just buy processors. They buy enormous amounts of memory, networking equipment, storage systems, cooling infrastructure, power delivery. Everything has to work together. Artificial intelligence isn't one machine. It's an ecosystem. And ecosystems are only as strong as their weakest part. China understood this years ago, long before artificial intelligence became today's biggest buzzword, long before investors started pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into AI startups, long before the world became obsessed with GPU shortages. China was already asking a different question. Not, how do we build the fastest AI chip? But, what does an entire AI ecosystem actually need? That single question changed everything. Instead of focusing on one breakthrough, China began investing across the entire technology stack. Chip manufacturing, cloud computing, advanced packaging, semiconductor materials, AI software, and perhaps the most overlooked piece of all, memory. At first, almost nobody outside the semiconductor industry noticed. Why would they? Memory companies rarely appear on magazine covers. Their CEOs aren't internet celebrities. Their product launches don't attract millions of viewers. They quietly build the components that allow everyone else's products to work. They're the foundation. And foundations are almost invisible until you try building without them. That's when the cracks begin to appear. Then, artificial intelligence exploded. ChatGPT changed the world almost overnight. Every major technology company launched an AI strategy. Governments declared AI a national priority. Data centers expanded faster than ever before. Suddenly, the entire world wanted more computing power, more GPUs, more servers, more infrastructure. But something unexpected happened. Demand for memory started growing at an extraordinary pace. not because memory had suddenly become fashionable, but because every new AI system needed enormous amounts of it. The more powerful AI became, the more valuable memory became. And while much of the world rushed to secure GPUs, China was quietly strengthening one of the industries that every AI system depends on. An industry most people had never even heard about. An industry that could quietly reshape the balance of technological power over the next decade. At the center of that story was a company called CXMT, a company that just a few years ago, almost nobody outside China knew existed. Today, engineers, investors, governments, and some of the world's biggest technology companies are all watching it very carefully. Because this story isn't really about one company, it's about something much bigger. It's about what happens when a country decides that it no longer wants to depend on anyone else to build the future. And once you understand how China reached this point, you'll realize that the AI race isn't just about who builds the smartest model. It's about who builds the strongest foundation underneath it. If memory is so important, why haven't most people ever heard of the companies making it? The answer is surprisingly simple. Because memory companies rarely create headlines. They create the technology that allows other companies to create headlines. When ChatGPT amazed the world, people talked about OpenAI. When Nvidia became one of the most valuable companies in history, people talked about GPUs. But almost nobody stopped to ask, where does all that data actually live? Who builds the memory that keeps these AI systems running? And that's where today's story really begins. For more than 3 decades, the global memory industry was controlled by just a handful of giants. Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron. These companies didn't just sell memory chips. They became the backbone of modern computing. Your smartphone, your laptop, gaming consoles, cloud servers, AI data centers. Almost everything relied on memory built by one of these companies. Breaking into this industry wasn't just difficult. It was considered almost impossible. Because manufacturing advanced DRAM isn't like assembling a phone. It's one of the most complex engineering challenges on Earth. Imagine trying to build billions of microscopic switches, each one thousands of times thinner than a human hair. Now imagine every single one of them has to work perfectly. Not 99%, not 99.9%, almost all of them. Because if too many tiny cells fail, the entire chip becomes worthless. This is why semiconductor engineers obsess over one word: yield. Yield measures how many chips leaving the factory actually work. A tiny improvement in yield can earn a company billions of dollars. A tiny mistake can cost billions instead. That's why experience matters so much. You can't master memory manufacturing overnight. It takes years, sometimes decades, which is exactly why many experts believed no new competitor could seriously challenge the existing leaders. Then China decided to try anyway, not because it expected instant success, but because it understood something much bigger. Technology independence isn't achieved by buying chips, it's achieved by learning how to build them. That philosophy gradually spread across China's semiconductor industry. One company focused on advanced manufacturing, another developed AI processors, others invested in packaging, materials, electronic design software, cloud computing, and deep research. But when it came to DRAM, one company slowly started attracting attention: Changshin Memory Technologies, better known as CXMT. At first, almost nobody outside semiconductor circles noticed. There were no flashy product launches, no billion-dollar keynote presentations, no celebrity CEOs. CXMT wasn't trying to become famous. It was trying to become better. Every year, the company improved its manufacturing, expanded production, hired more engineers, built more fabrication capacity, generation after generation. It quietly kept moving forward. And because progress happened gradually, almost nobody paid attention until artificial intelligence changed everything. Almost overnight, the world's appetite for memory exploded. Training large AI models required thousands of GPUs working together. But those GPUs couldn't operate alone. Every processor needed an enormous amount of data, constantly. Imagine trying to read an entire library while someone hands you only one page every minute. No matter how fast you can read, you'll spend most of your time waiting. That's exactly what happens when powerful processors don't receive enough data. This is why engineers often say, modern AI doesn't just consume computing power. It consumes bandwidth. It consumes memory. It consumes infrastructure. And every new generation of AI consumes even more. Suddenly, memory wasn't just another component inside a server. It became strategic. Cloud providers started expanding faster than ever before. Governments announced national AI initiatives. Technology companies raced to build larger data centers. Demand surged across the entire semiconductor supply chain. And then, reports began suggesting something that caught the industry's attention. Some of China's largest technology companies were increasingly turning toward domestic memory suppliers, not simply because they wanted to, because they needed reliable long-term supply. Among the names drawing attention, CXMT appeared again and again. One reported multi-billion-dollar supply agreement involving Tencent became a powerful signal, not because it meant China had already overtaken the industry leaders. It hadn't. Samsung remained a dominant force. SK Hynix continued leading in high-bandwidth memory. Micron remained one of the world's most advanced memory manufacturers. Those companies were still incredibly strong. But for the first time in years, a new challenger was beginning to emerge. And sometimes, the most important moment in an industry isn't when a new leader appears. It's when a serious competitor finally arrives. Because competition changes everything. Prices change. Investment changes. Innovation accelerates. Customers gain more options. Governments rethink strategy. Entire supply chains begin evolving. And that's exactly what many analysts believe we're starting to witness today. But here's the part that fascinated me the most. China's strategy was never really about replacing one foreign company with one domestic company. That would have been far too small. Instead, China appears to be building something much larger, an ecosystem. Because memory alone isn't enough. Processors aren't enough. Factories aren't enough. Software isn't enough. Each piece depends on the others. Think of it like building a city. A city doesn't become successful because it has one beautiful skyscraper. It succeeds because roads, electricity, water, communications, transportation, hospitals, universities, businesses, and millions of people all work together. Artificial intelligence works exactly the same way. And once you understand that, you begin realizing that China may not be trying to win one technology race. It may be trying to build an entire technological civilization. And if that's true, then CXMT is only one chapter in a much bigger story. When most people hear the phrase, the AI race, they imagine two companies competing, or maybe two countries. But that's no longer how this industry works. Artificial intelligence has become something much bigger. It's no longer just software, it's infrastructure, just like electricity, just like the internet, just like railways transformed the Industrial Revolution. Artificial intelligence is becoming the infrastructure of the digital age. And history teaches us something interesting. The countries that control infrastructure usually shape the future. That's exactly why the semiconductor industry has become one of the most important strategic industries on Earth. Not because chips are exciting, but because almost everything depends on them. Your phone, your car, your hospital, your bank, your satellites, your military, your power grid. Even the AI writing code today exists because millions of tiny semiconductor devices are working together. And that's why this story matters, because what China is building isn't just another semiconductor company. It's an ecosystem designed to reduce dependence on foreign technology. Think about it. If one country controls your processors, another controls your memory, a third controls the software, and someone else controls the manufacturing equipment, then your technological future depends on decisions made outside your borders. China understood that risk years ago. So instead of asking, how do we build one great company? It asked a much larger question. How do we build an entire technology ecosystem? That's a completely different strategy, and it's one that takes years, sometimes decades, because ecosystems can't be built overnight. You need universities producing engineers, research laboratories pushing new ideas, factories capable of manufacturing at enormous scale, cloud companies deploying infrastructure, investors willing to wait years before seeing returns, government policies supporting long-term development, and perhaps most importantly, patience. Lots of patience. That's something many people underestimate. When headlines talk about technology, they usually focus on today's product launch, today's earnings report, today's stock price. But semiconductor progress doesn't happen in days, or weeks, or even months. It happens over years, sometimes over generations. Every new production node, every manufacturing improvement, every increase in yield represents thousands of engineers solving thousands of problems, one after another. That's why this industry rewards persistence more than speed. And that's exactly how China's semiconductor strategy appears to be evolving. Not through one miracle breakthrough, but through continuous improvement, factory by factory, process by process, engineer by engineer, year after year. Does that mean China has already won? No, not even close. Samsung remains one of the strongest memory companies in the world. SK Hynix continues leading in advanced high-bandwidth memory, which powers many of today's most advanced AI accelerators. Micron continues pushing memory technology forward through decades of engineering experience. These companies are still global leaders, and catching them won't be easy. China also faces enormous challenges: restrictions on advanced manufacturing equipment, access to cutting-edge lithography systems, yield improvements, research costs, global competition. None of these obstacles disappear simply because a country invests more money. Money helps. But engineering excellence takes time, and that's what makes the next decade so fascinating. Because for the first time in many years, the memory industry isn't standing still. It's becoming more competitive, more dynamic, more strategic. The companies leading today will have to keep innovating. The companies chasing them will have to keep improving. And somewhere inside that competition, the future of artificial intelligence will continue taking shape. Now think back to the beginning of this story. The entire world was watching Nvidia, and that made perfect sense. Nvidia changed artificial intelligence forever. Its GPUs became the engines behind modern AI. Without them, today's AI revolution would look very different. But while the spotlight remained fixed on processors, another story was quietly unfolding, a story about the invisible foundation beneath those processors. Because processors think, memory remembers, networking connects, storage preserves. Manufacturing makes everything possible. Remove just one piece, and the entire system begins slowing down. That's why the AI race isn't a race for one chip. It's a race to build an entire ecosystem. And ecosystems are incredibly difficult to copy. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson here. The future of artificial intelligence won't be decided by a single breakthrough. It will be shaped by thousands of breakthroughs, working together. Some of them will make headlines. Most of them won't. Some companies will become household names. Others will quietly build the technologies those household names depend on. CXMT may become one of those companies, or it may simply become one important chapter in China's much larger semiconductor journey. Only time will tell. But one thing already seems clear: the AI revolution isn't only changing software. It isn't only changing hardware. It's changing how nations think about technology itself. For decades, efficiency was the goal. Today, resilience has become just as important. Supply chains matter. Domestic manufacturing matters. Semiconductor expertise matters. Memory matters. And perhaps that's why this story deserves attention. Not because it proves anyone has already won, but because it reveals how the rules of competition are changing. The next decade won't simply be about building faster AI. It will be about building stronger technological foundations. And while everyone was watching the companies creating the world's smartest processors, China was quietly asking a different question. What will those processors need? 10 years from now? Maybe. That question will become far more important than anyone realizes today. Because history rarely remembers the people who followed the spotlight. It remembers the ones who built the stage. And in the age of artificial intelligence, that stage may be built from something as ordinary and as extraordinary as memory.